That's the second chord, fourth chord. So this has that extra retrigger command embedded into each one if you just want to jump straight to it. Hi, this is Andre. We're going to take one loop with 4 chords and then use loop windowing to treat those chords like 4 separate loops that we can switch between. This involves moving the loop's start point and length, and we'll be using a patch I made for the Empress Zoya, which you can download from the description below. Throughout the video, we'll be displaying the current settings for the loop's start point and length. We'll describe it in general musical terms like which chord we're starting with and how many chords we're hearing. We'll also list the technical details of which continuous controllers are mapped to the start and length parameters, and what the controller values are at any given time as we move the loop window through different sizes and starting points. Alright, we're going to start by recording 4 chords. First chord, second chord, third chord, fourth chord. All right, I'm going to do a long press and release on switch E, and now we're just hearing the first chord. Long press and release on switch E, change the loop length to 25% of its total length. And because we have 4 chords that are hopefully evenly spaced, we're going to find out in a bit, then as you shorten it down to 25%, you're just going to hear 1 chord at a time. And then by moving that 25% window forwards into other parts of the loop, we can isolate each of the 4 chords by itself. So right now this is the first chord, short press and release on F, moves us to the second chord. And again, the window, the length of the loop is still just 25% of the total length. So now it's just repeating the second chord that we played. Short press and release on G, moves us to the third chord. Short press and release of H, moves us to the fourth chord. So basically E, F, G, and H all represent the starting point of each of the 4 chords. So we can switch to any of them. E represents the normal start point. B is 25% in. I'm sorry, F is 25% in. G is 50% in. H is 75% in. Let's go back to loop 1. Now the triggering is a little weird. I find that if you're going from an earlier loop to a later loop, well, take a look. Now there's the second chord, third chord, here comes the fourth chord, and now it should loop on just that last chord. Yeah, so I find if you start on an earlier chord and then select a later chord, it will go up to that later chord from wherever it is, going through all the other chords in the middle, and then when it gets to that target chord, then it will start repeating. If you go from a later point to an earlier point, then it will trigger immediately. So I have the selection switches for each chord on a short press and release. And you'll hear if I do that, it jumps immediately. It doesn't wait. If I do that for the first one, but now I selected G, so it's going up. We just heard the second chord. Now it's on the third chord. Now it's just staying there. Now let's stay on the third chord, but let's expand the length of the window out to 50% of the total length. So now we should be hearing the last 2 chords. Third chord, fourth chord. If we come back to the first chord, second chord, first chord, second chord. Now let's select the second chord, short press and release. Now there's the second chord, there's the third chord, and now it'll toggle between the second and the third. Because the window is 50% of the overall length of the loop. Let's change the window to 3/4 of the loop. Long press of switch G, long press and release of switch G. So now we're hearing chords 2, chord 3, and chord 4. If we go back to chord 1, okay, I pressed too long, evidently. So, long press and release of G, short press of E, second chord. Now after this it should go back to the first chord. Good. So now the window length is 3/4 of the total loop length. And if we do a long press and release of H, that's going to give us the entire loop length, the normal loop length as it was originally recorded. So third chord, fourth chord. And let's go back down to a 1-chord length. And again, you'll notice if you select an earlier chord, then as soon as you do the short press and release, it immediately triggers. Whereas if we select the fourth chord, it's going to go through chords 2, 3, and 4. There's the second chord. There's the third chord. Fourth chord, and now it's just going to hang out on the fourth chord. So if you're going in ascending order, it will walk its way through the rest of the loop, and then once it gets to the target, it'll hang out and repeat there. If you go descending to a lower chord, then it will immediately start playing. So short press and release will access E, and you hear as soon as you release the foot. So I think that's just a quirk of how the Zoya looper works. All right, let's change pages. So on this, I have it set up so that the bottom row A, B, C, and D are the 4 chords, but there's also a retrigger command on each one. So ideally, you're basically hearing each chord. So that time we didn't go ascending from the first, second, and third chord and then stay on the third chord. That's the second chord, fourth chord. So this has that extra retrigger command embedded into each one if you just want to jump straight to it. So right now the loop length, or the window length, is still 1/4 of the overall loop length. If we do a selection on switch F in this page, now it's retriggering it on 8th notes. And that's going to be the length for anything we select. Oh, okay, now it is walking its way up. There it is. Okay, that time it didn't walk up. I'm still in the early days of this technique, so it could very easily be me programming something a little weird too. So right now the length is 1/8. We can go back to 1/4 of the overall loop length. And we can also shorten it further to 1/16. And again, sometimes it jumps directly, sometimes it doesn't. So this is the 16th length. This is the 8th length. This is the quarter length. And this is the granular. And we're not hearing anything because the beginning of each of those segments actually begins with the attack on the string. There we can hear that, but basically for chords 2, 3, and 4, there's a few milliseconds between the technical start point of that position and when the chord actually sounded. So that's why for loops 2, 3, and 4, you're just hearing that repeating percussive thing. I would rather have it like that than have it starting too early. So let's go back to 16ths. And we're going to switch pages again. And we're going to move the window length to 50% of the overall loop. So first two chords, back to chord number 1. Now we're going to move the window length to 75% of the original loop. So now we're hearing chords 1, 2, and 3. Second chord, third chord. Now we'll go back to chord 1. And now I'm going to do a long press and release of H, which is going to give us the entire original loop length. So now we're hearing all 4 chords as they were originally recorded. And what do I want to do? Let's go back to chord 2. So this is just chords 2 and 3. If we select chord 3, we're going to hear chords 3 and 4. This is 4 right now. That's the third chord. That's the fourth chord. If we go back to chord 1, we're going to hear the first 2. So that's the first chord, second chord. Now it'll go back to chord 1, chord 2, and long press of H. Long press and release of H gives us the entire loop length again.